Welcome to Teaching Truth. Observe any actor, any school teacher, any public speaker, any presenter, any preacher. And very quickly you'll discover it's not so much what they say as the manner in how they say it and how they engage that is of vital importance. That was no less true for Paul as he engaged, as he sought to communicate with the philosophers in the city of Athens. It wasn't so much what Paul said, whilst that was in and of itself of real importance, but it was the manner in which he endeavoured to engage and communicate. He reasoned, he debated, he discussed. And in our reflections today, we want to think about the communication. We want to consider the method and style and indeed the tone of communication that Paul deployed. We read in Acts chapter 17 that Paul spoke in the synagogue. But Paul also went out into the marketplace. The marketplace in those days would be an area of great trade where food would be bought, clothes would be sold, an area where people would come to do business, where many people would be bustling about. And it's into that marketplace situation that Paul went. He seized the opportunities to speak with people, many of whom would just be milling about in the marketplace. It's also recorded for us that Paul reasoned and dialogued with the Jews in the synagogue in Athens. We can learn a lot from the method and the style of Paul's communication. For example, Paul had a heart and he was concerned. We read in verse 16 that he was greatly distressed to see that the city was full of idols. In his communication, he communicated out of a concern, out of a heart for the situation. Do we communicate out of a heart of concern? We also read that he reasoned in the synagogue as well as in the marketplace. He reasoned and debated. In other words, he engaged in a way and at a level that was appropriate to his audience. And sometimes as Christians, in our desire to share the good news of Jesus Christ, we can sometimes share the message, but actually do it in a way that is not perhaps the most appropriate way. Sometimes we can force it upon people. Paul didn't do that. Paul reasoned. He explored. He debated. Perhaps that's why the Alpha course is so fruitful and successful. It allows people to explore, to reason, to debate, as Paul did. But Paul also found in his communication a connection point. Verses 22 to 23. Paul stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus and said, "Men of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious." So he's acknowledging that they're religious. He's not criticizing them. Note that he's acknowledging that. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription: to an unknown God. Now, what you worship as something unknown, I am going to proclaim to you. In other words, Paul found that connection point. He found that chink in their armour. He engaged with them at that intellectual level. He discovered that opening, that opportunity. I well remember the evening when I was just pottering about in my front garden, and a neighbour from round the corner was just out on his evening walk. He was a Sikh, and he stopped and we got chatting, and he made some nice comments about the garden, and we just spoke about different things, and the conversation somehow just got on to what we believed. And I just found an opportunity to share with him about the church that we went to and the belief that I had, and he too shared with me. And there was just that sense of acknowledgement of each other's belief, that almost that sense of respect. And in a sense, we reasoned, we debated, we discussed in a good and a respectful way. I found a connection point with my Sikh friend as he began to share with me. Paul also challenged people. He also challenged people. Paul says now he commands all people everywhere to repent, for he has set a day when he will judge the world with justice by the man he has appointed. He has given proof of this to all men by raising him from the dead. Paul was not afraid to challenge, and we ought never to shy away from challenging people wisely and well with the truth and the reality of the gospel and the full counsel of God. Paul also prepared for insults and interest. Some of them sneered, but others said, "We want to hear you again on this subject." Paul was open, having communicated to people coming back to him to discuss further, as well as people openly disagreeing with them. But Paul, in his communication, was faithful, and he was rewarded for that faithfulness, because we read that there were some who became followers. How we communicate is of vital importance. Paul reasoned, Paul debated, Paul explored, Paul probed with those with whom he was communicating. May we follow the example of Paul, and as we have the opportunity to communicate the good news and our testimony to others, may we do so wisely and well. May we find those connection points in order to be able to communicate respectfully, but also in a way that will challenge others as to their relationship with Jesus Christ.